A day in the life of a nautical chart maker. In 1845 London, the clock in the steeple of St. Magnus the Martyr strikes 5:30, and even through the thick, coal-dusted pane of my small drawing-room window, the sound is muffled, a dull, leaden thud against the endless, rushing groan of London. I, Elias Finch, am a man of precise measure in an unholy, sprawling chaos. I am 43 years old, and my trade is the mapping of the known world, specifically the sea lanes that bind the British Empire. I am a nautical chart maker, a practitioner of hydrography with a small, two-room establishment nestled near the docks of Wapping, yet close enough to the financial hub of the city that the merchants and captains can find me easily. My standing, socially speaking, is an uncomfortable perch on the upper branches of the working class, or perhaps the lower stratum of the respectable middle class. I am self-made. My father was a cooper, a man of staves and iron hoops, not of vellum and ink. But I had a decent hand for figures and the good fortune to be apprenticed to an old naval surveyor who taught me the difference between a rum line and a great circle, and the terror of an unmarked reef. I am not a gentleman. I do not own land, nor do I possess a seat in any grand hall. But I am an authority. When a captain of the East India Company lays his brass rules across my latest chart, bound for Calcutta, he does so with respect, for my skill dictates whether his vessel, his cargo, and his soul will reach their destination or founder off the Cape. My reputation is my capital, and my accuracy is my salvation. The first ritual of my day is silence. I sit on the edge of my simple iron bed, the straw mattress rustling beneath me, and listen to the city wake. The sounds are a topography of the working day, the creak of the cartwheels beginning their journey from the markets, the hollow clatter of the lamplighter's ladder, and the sharp, rhythmic cough of Mr. Plimpton, the ship chandler across the street, a sound that promises consumption and an early grave. I light my oil lamp. The gaslights of the city proper are still sleeping, but here, in the docklands, darkness holds its grip longer. My rooms are above the shop, accessible by a cramped, steep staircase. It is my own self-contained world, a kitchen nook, a bedroom, and the main drawing room, which is both my private study and where I conduct my most delicate work. The air is cold and carries the distinct odor of my profession, a blend of stale pipe smoke, sizing, the glue used to prepare paper, and the metallic tang of the copper plate engravings I sometimes oversee. I dress in my standard attire, a dark, well-brushed wool coat, grey trousers, and a waistcoat, all cut to be respectable but not fashionable. Everything must have pockets for instruments, my brass rule, my pencil, my folding magnifier. I am a man who must always be ready to measure. By 7 o'clock, I am in the main workshop, which serves the shop front and the central working area. The day's light is still weak, filtering through the heavily smoked glass. My apprentice, young Thomas, will arrive at 8, but the first hour belongs only to me and my instruments. My desk is the center of my universe, a massive oak table scarred with generations of compass points and ink stains. I uncover my latest commission, a new edition of the Caribbean charts, incorporating the most recent soundings taken by HMS Vulture. The beauty of my work lies in the conversion of raw, chaotic data into calm, geometric order. The paper, a great heavy sheet of French vellum, is pinned taut. I dip my fine point quill into the bottle of India ink. This is the moment where I translate the raw logs. Thousands of frantic handwritten depth readings, notes on prevailing currents, and rough coastline sketches made by overworked naval sub-lieutenants, all taken from the Admiralty archives. The anxiety of my life is bound up in this process. A single slip of the quill, a moment of inattention in placing a fathom line, could mean the loss of a vessel. The sea shows no mercy to carelessness. I reflect, as I often do, on the philosophy of the line. A line drawn on paper is a decision. It is a promise of safety. It is a boundary against the abyss. My personal politics are simple. I believe in progress, and I believe in accuracy. The new steam engines that are rapidly replacing sail are wondrous, but they require even more precise navigation, for they cannot drift or tack to avoid danger. They run with a terrible, forceful momentum. I feel a kinship with the engineers, the metallurgists, and the surveyors, the men who are not talking about the world, but actively building it. I work on the delicate tracery of the Lesser Antilles coast, drawing the familiar, curling line that separates the water from the land. As the minutes tick by, I hear the first signs of the world encroaching. The heavy, measured tread of a policeman on the beat, the distant, frantic cries of a hawker selling watercress, and finally, the light step of Thomas tapping on the door. This signaled the start of the chaotic commerce that defined my mid-morning. Thomas, a boy of 16 with eternally ink-stained fingers, gets to work immediately on the secondary tasks, stoking the tiny coal stove in the corner, preparing the sizing to stiffen the edges of a newly printed chart, and grinding the pigments for the colouring. While I prefer to draw in black ink for ultimate clarity, the merchants love their maps to be coloured. The coastlines green, the deep ocean blue, the trade routes marked in imperial red. It costs them more, and it keeps Thomas busy. At 9:30, the bell above the shop door jingles sharply, cutting through the low hum of the stove and my own concentrated breathing. It is not the expected merchant. It is, instead, Captain Elias Hawthorne, a man who sails under his own colours, a private trader whose profits are rumoured to be built on speed and audacity, and whose ship is the fastest clipper out of the London docks. Captain Hawthorne is tall, broad, and dressed in heavy naval wool that smells of salt and good tobacco. He is a man of action, and he treats my quiet, methodical life with a degree of impatient scorn. Finch, that Fiji chart, I need it. Now he slams a leather case onto my desk, startling Thomas. I wipe my hands on a cloth. One must never touch vellum with a damp or soiled hand, and step forward. Captain, good morning. The Fiji chart is still awaiting confirmation of the latest Polynesian survey data. I told your man I would not release the revised edition until the full triangulation was verified. The northeastern reef complex is poorly documented in the old charts, and I cannot, in good conscience. Conscience be damned, Finch. He cuts me off, his voice a low growl. My ship, the Albatross, sails on the midnight tide. The new owners demand the most recent data. I am not running a missionary service. I am running a cargo of opium and silk, and I will not lose a shilling because you are waiting for a fellow in a sun hat to verify a few degrees of latitude. What you have, I take. This is the tyranny of the commercial world I live in. My dedication to scientific accuracy clashes constantly with the merchant's greed for speed. I want to tell him that his cargo, if sunk, costs only coin. But my carefully drawn line, if wrong, costs lives. But I need the business. I have Thomas to pay, and the quarterly rent to meet. I pull the large roll of the latest, but incomplete, Fiji chart from the locked cabinet. It is a stunning piece of work, covered in my minute, precise script. The deep sea soundings are marked by tiny figures, the current vectors by elegant, curving arrows. This section, I tap a remote area on the north edge of the chart, is speculative. The 1820 survey relied on a chronometer whose accuracy was questionable. The reef system may extend 2 miles further east than marked. You must assume maximum danger in this area. He barely glances at my warning. He spreads a handful of gold sovereigns on the table, a generous payment, perhaps even designed to salve his own conscience. I'll take my chances, Finch. Just tell me this, the longitude line running through the main channel, is it firm? It is firm. I've verified it against the Greenwich observation reports myself, to the very last second of arc. Good. He rolls the chart, tucks it into his case, and is gone. The jingle of the bell sounding like a final, insolent laugh. I sink back onto my stool, suddenly weary. The transaction is done. The money is good. But the weight of that unconfirmed reef hangs on my mind, a ghost on my chart. I resolve to write a sharp, insistent letter to the hydrographer's office to push for the release of that final data. I am a map maker, but I'm also a keeper of navigational morals. The need for sustenance broke the tension. The midday break is a necessary retreat from the demands of ink and commerce. Thomas is sent out to a local cook shop for a couple of meat pies, a hot, greasy comfort, and a measure of small beer. I take my own modest portion upstairs. My home is small but clean, a fortress against the foulness of the street. I think of the reports I read, the terrifying statistics on disease, the dreadful effluvia that runs through the open gutters, the omnipresent odor of coal smoke and human waste. I believe that cleanliness is not only next to godliness, but essential to sanity. While I eat, I read a passage from the newspaper, the Daily News. The leading article today is not about foreign wars or political squabbles, but about public health and the great stink. The debate on sanitation rages, the clash between those who believe the noxious vapors, miasma, cause disease, and those who, like the progressive Dr. Snow, are beginning to point to contaminated water. My standing as an educated middle-class Londoner affords me a privileged vantage point for observing the vast, terrifying social engine we inhabit. We are building the future, but we are standing on a massive foundation of human misery. I, with my steady income, feel perpetually guilty and yet powerless. How can I map the oceans when the Thames, the very spine of our city, is a septic wound? My maps and my life demand order and logic. The world outside my window demands compassion and chaos. I reflect upon my own beliefs. I am a child of my age, a man of science, but not a scoffer at faith. I attend my parish church, St. George in the East, and I believe in a divine creator. But I believe that his greatest truth is revealed not in ancient scrolls, but in the measurable, verifiable laws of the physical world. The precision of my sextants, the clockwork certainty of the chronometers. These are hymns of the Creator's mathematical genius. The great geological epochs, the slow but certain shifting of continents that I observe in the differences between old and new surveys. These speak of a vast, unhurried timeline that makes the biblical timeline seem like a single tick of the clock. This is a private heresy, perhaps, but it is one I share with many intellectuals of my time. A respect for God, but a fierce devotion to the truth revealed by observation. After my brief respite, I turn my attention to pure research, the nourishment of my craft. The afternoon is reserved for this pursuit. I leave Thomas in charge, instructing him precisely on the method for mounting a new chart onto his linen backing, a task requiring absolute stillness and careful application of starch paste. I take a short, brisk walk towards Whitehall, heading for the hydrographic office of the Admiralty. The journey is a sensory bombardment. I move from the working-class stench of the docks, past the noisy, bustling pubs, and into the grander, cleaner streets of the government district. The architecture changes, from cramped, timber-framed houses to magnificent, imposing stone facades that speak of imperial power. I pass carriages carrying ministers and clerks, and I see the stark contrast between their well-fed, tailored prosperity and the gaunt, ragged figures of the beggars huddled against the walls. My destination is a quiet, dusty sanctuary of knowledge. The hydrographic office is a warren of rooms filled with ledgers, logbooks, and charts dating back centuries. This is where the raw data of the world resides. The journals of explorers, the meticulous notebooks of surveyors, the records of voyages to places I will only ever see in 2 dimensions. I have come today to consult the logs of the Franklin expedition, or rather, the last known logs before their fateful disappearance into the Arctic ice. A growing anxiety grips the nation regarding the lost ships, Erebus and Terror. My current side project, a speculative map of the Northwest Passage based on the hypothesis of a navigable route, requires every scrap of information. I speak with the head clerk, a sharp, nervous man named Mr. Davies, who views my commercial curiosity with suspicion. Finch, again with the polar charts. They are designated sensitive. The public must not know how little we truly know about those high latitudes. It is unsettling, Mr. Davies, I counter, trying to keep my voice respectful. Unsettling knowledge is still knowledge. My purpose is not to unsettle, but to prepare the rescue expeditions. If I can combine the data from Parry and Ross with the anecdotal evidence from the whalers, I can generate a more plausible line of travel for the relief ships. After a great deal of shuffling papers and harumphing about propriety, he grants me access to the final chart sketches returned by a supply ship. For 2 intense hours, I sit at a communal table, my folding magnifier pressed against the brittle paper, transcribing coordinates. The work is thrilling. I am reading the last written words of men who face the ultimate blank space on the map. They report the discovery of new islands, the precise measurement of an inlet, the magnetic variation in a new location. These men, frozen in time and space, are still speaking to me through geometry. I am a man who loves the certainty of the coordinate grid, the rigid structure of latitude and longitude that tames the boundless ocean. Yet, the Franklin log reminds me of the limits of my profession. No amount of fine calculation can predict the malice of nature, the cruelty of a shifting ice flow, or the final failure of human endurance. I copy the data, but I leave the office with a heavy sense of the vast, unmappable unknown that lies just beyond the edges of the drawing. The failing light signaled my return to Wapping. By 5 in the evening, I am back in my shop. The gaslights of the city are now sputtering to life, casting an amber, theatrical glow that contrasts with the deep blue dusk. Thomas is packing up. He reports 3 more orders placed by junior clerks for basic coastal outlines, and he has finished coloring the charts of the Channel Islands. I pay him his day's wages, a modest sum, enough to keep his mother satisfied. I advise him, as I always do, to save a portion, to think about his own future independence. He thanks me politely and hurries off into the evening crowds. The street outside is a different animal now. The carts have largely retreated, but the foot traffic is thicker, louder, and more dissolute. The pubs are overflowing with the day's earnings. The street corner musicians are playing cheap, sentimental tunes. The smell is no longer coal smoke and salt, but cooked fish, cheap spirits, and the faint, sweet scent of desperation. I check my own accounts. The payment from Captain Hawthorne is substantial enough to cover the vellum bill, the rent, and a new set of parallel rules I have long coveted. I am financially solvent, but one large storm, one major shipping loss, or one economic panic could wipe out my entire trade. My prosperity is built entirely on the stability of the empire and the success of others. Before I close the shutters, I stand at the door for a moment, observing the great, roaring, beautiful, and terrible machine of London. I see the newspaper sellers shouting headlines about the new American steamships. I see the flow of humanity, the servant girls scurrying back to their grand houses, the gentlemen heading to their clubs, and the countless nameless poor retreating to the tenements. I am neither the powerful master nor the utterly destitute victim. I am the man who calculates the distance between them. I am the man of the middle, who tries to bring intellectual order to the physical world, while battling the social disorder of the spiritual one. My status gives me freedom, but not power. I can think what I wish, read what I choose, and draw maps that contradict centuries of received wisdom. But I cannot command a ship, nor vote for a change in Parliament. I am a specialist, a small, necessary cog in the immense industrial apparatus. Once the street was quiet, I began the work that mattered only to me. I close the shutters and bolt the door. My final work of the day is not for commerce, but for myself. I ascend to my drawing room and turn up the lamp. On a side table, beneath a protective cloth, lies my lifelong personal project, a map not of the sea, but of the sky above London. It is a star chart, meticulously drawn, showing the constellations visible from the meridian line, but I have added another layer. I have begun to map the trajectories of meteors, the transient, fiery streaks that cut across the celestial permanence. Tonight, I work on a more speculative piece, an overlay detailing the geological deep time of the city. I am using the theories of Mr. Lyle, who speaks of millennia, where once we spoke of days. I take a clean sheet of heavy watercolor paper and begin to sketch the outline of the Thames Basin. I imagine this land not as it is now, a teeming metropolis, but as it was, a marshy delta, a Roman outpost, a Saxon forest, and before that, a vast, empty plain being scoured by a glacier millions of years ago. I draw the invisible boundaries, the lines of buried rivers, the strata of chalk and clay beneath the foundations of my very shop. I use soft charcoal and sepia ink, tools of art, not measurement, for this map is a matter of speculation, not survey. This is the freedom of being Elias Finch, a man whose mind travels further than any ship he charts. My day is spent measuring reefs, documenting currents, and verifying latitudes for commerce and empire. But my night is spent grappling with the deep, unmeasured realities of time, space, and human transience. I draw a faint, elegant line marking the proposed route of the new underground railway, a line that cuts directly through the strata I believe to be Eocene clay. It is a map of the future and the past superimposed, the terrible haste of man laid over the sublime slowness of earth. It is near midnight when I finally lay down my charcoal stick. The shop is cold now, the stove long since banked. The city outside is quiet, but not silent, a muffled, ongoing, organic noise that never truly stops. I stand before the map, illuminated by the fading lamp. My life is here, bound by the dimensions of my drawing room, shaped by the needs of trade, and defined by the struggle to find order in the chaotic data of the universe. I am a small man in a great age, but I am the one who draws the lines. And those lines, for a while at least, hold the world together. I extinguish the lamp. The night is deep and starless, choked by the London smoke. But I know, because I have mapped it, that the stars are still there,